To fully understand someone's psyche, what they're all about, their drive, you got to know more about their past. And that's what we're going to do here. We are going to talk with a trailblazer, a pioneer, a game changer in sports media. The great Aimee Leone is with me. And of course, she is Senior Vice President of Talent Relations at Fox Sports. She joins me on the Onto Something podcast. I'm Bryan Fenley, a national anchor for Fox Sports Radio, on Twitter at Bryan Fenley. This is not some Q&A about her career. Sure, we'll talk about her career, but we're going to learn about her life and her drive and the root of what inspires her. This is going to be a panoramic look of her life, if you will. And I'm really excited, Aimee, to have you on. Thank you for making the time. I wanted to start here. The longest bike ride that you've ever been on, where was it?
It was, well, first off, it wasn't what it was supposed to be. It was a century ride. For those of you who know, that's a 100-mile ride. It was out to Montauk on Long Island, very flat. So I felt really comfortable with it. But it was 103 miles. And the last couple of miles were uphill. So I did it. I think I was pedaling physically for days after, but it was one of the most amazing experiences that I ever had. And it was one of those where people who love me, who were supportive, said, hey, look, if you can't make it, we'll drive out there to pick you up. And for those who know me, they know that I can never not take a good dare. So to doubt that I might make it, to put any doubt in there, thinking that there might be another option, just made me even more committed. So that last 3 miles I pushed through. It was uphill. We made it. And it was one of the great experiences of my life.
You taking on dares and overcoming challenges, where did that come from initially? When did you notice that you took on that personality trait?
I noticed, as I told you when we were talking before, when I was 11 and realized that where meat came from, I decided that I was going to be a vegetarian. So it was at a dinner. We were at Disney World. It was with my whole family. And I ordered a hamburger. And I came to the table and I couldn't eat it. And my dad said, that's okay. You don't have to eat it. And you can be a part-time vegetarian. And with that, the Scorpio in me came out. And I said, you know what? I'm doing this. And a part-time vegetarian was not going to be an option. If I was declaring it at that moment at 11 on February 4th, I might add, I remember the day very specifically. I became a vegetarian and I never looked back.
I like the fact that you're a Scorpio because I am as well. So we have that in common. Aimee Leone is with me. I'm Bryan Fenley. When you would go, Aimee, on those long bike trips, how often would work come into your mind as you're trudging up a big hill or going down a big downhill slope in what you're doing?
I should probably say that it came up a lot, but it actually didn't. Biking has always been, whether it's 5 miles or a longer distance ride, or quite frankly, a Peloton class now, it's my time away. I never wear headphones. I don't listen to music. I don't listen to podcasts. Sorry. I just ride in silence and I listen to the wind, and it's the most relaxing space for me mentally ever. It's really therapeutic.
You've used that to sort of deprogram in a way, and it's certainly something that would come in handy in this chaotic business. There's so much going on at all times in sports media and working on so many different things. Getting more into you as a child, you talked about when you were 11 years old and you became a vegetarian, and you haven't cheated on that. That's kudos to you and your determination. And that determination has showed up in other parts of your life as well. But I want to go into, Aimee, the role that your father had on your life. When you were a teenager and you were watching him, what do you recall about the way in which he parented you?
My dad was, and first off, I love my mom because I will make her listen to this. So I want to give a shout out to my mom. It was just her birthday the other day. So lots of love there. But my dad just had this, he and I had this bond, and she knows that. My whole family knows that. I loved my father so much, and I loved what he did and the passion he had for work. My dad was a cartoonist. He was an animator and an illustrator and a gag writer. And when you grow up around that, it's something really special. And suddenly from that, like, not every career path seems appropriate. You know, you want to have fun with it. You want to make sure that it's something you're really, really excited about. And humor and fun are, and working as part of a team were really important to me as I figured life out. And I measure against that a lot today. And thankfully, I've been blessed to work with a whole lot of fun people who high five at the end of a great team project, and it's really rewarding. But seeing him enjoy what he did influenced me so much.
To what extreme, though, Aimee, did he enjoy his work, and that at times it became so much a part of his life where perhaps there wasn't, and not to say that there always can be a balance in this business because of the time constraints, but where you saw him extra dedicated to his craft?
Yeah, we grew up in an apartment in New Rochelle, New York. My dad didn't drive, so we had to be walking distance from the train station, but he had a studio in the back of the apartment. So he had a room with the drawing table that he got when he graduated high school. He went to it was the High School of Art and Design. It was back in the day when high school was like your big education and you learned a trade there. And he was recruited, I believe, by Superman DC Comics. So they gave him a drawing table that he used, honestly, up until the day he died. And I remember that in the back. I remember going back there. It was right behind the kitchen. So you'd make lunch and you'd see him, or you'd come home from school and he'd be in the back there. And I'd get to peek into what he was doing. But oftentimes he came out into the rest of the apartment to show us, to get a reaction to cartoons that he did. And he wanted our feedback. And I guess as I think about it, maybe that's why I integrate work so much with my life, because he did too. I never doubted that his family was the most important thing to him, but I loved that his career and his love for his career was kind of woven through the fabric of our family. So I guess now as I talk through it, probably something that I do as well, and that I took from that. I've always tried to integrate my kids into what I do. They've come into the office with me when they were little. I went to Olympics, they came to Olympics, and my husband would bring them out. So they felt very much a part of what I was doing, which is how I grew up as well.
You mentioned how your father would sort of seek some approval from you, and he would show some of his work. Even to this day, Aimee, since he's passed, how do you find that maybe you still are seeking his validation, or what does that look like in one way or another?
I actually don't think I need to seek it. There are so many. There's a word that my dad used to use, kvel. I can't remember if it's Yiddish but it's such a deep pride that you feel for something. It's a love and it's a pride that you feel to your core. And my dad kveled about his kids all the time. And he loved that he influenced me in my career path. I remember when I went in, I think I was 10 years old. He was working on a TV project and he was the writer or creative something. And he brought me in to work that day. And it was a shoot. It was quiet on the set. Everybody, there was a control room. I got to see all of that. And I remember seeing a girl with a clipboard and a stopwatch. And she was a PA. And I looked at her as a 10-year-old and I looked up at this girl and I thought, oh my gosh, that's what I want to do. And I remember the first time I was in a production and I had a clipboard and a stopwatch. And I had that moment where I stood there and I looked at myself and I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. I'm that girl now. And, he was around to see that, and he loved that being there with him influenced what I ultimately ended up doing. And he loved that I had the love for the work that I did and do.
How would he show his pride for you or his love for you as your career continued on?
Oh, it was out there. It was telling his friends. It was telling us, I'm so proud of you all the time. And me, my sister, and my brother. for whatever we were doing. You know, it was never a competition. There was enough love to go around just because I went in that a similar career path. It wasn't that he felt more, but he definitely had this pride, extra layer of pride, that I went into a field that was influenced by what he was doing.
What was different though about his approach to the business? You saw that, and then you made your own personal tweaks to your outlook on how you want to
Mhm.
wade through your career.
I think my dad felt a lot of times that he was in rooms he didn't belong in. You know, he was a kid at his core. My dad was a little kid from the Bronx. He was, you know, some of these other people were highly educated. He was the funny guy. So a lot of times he felt like he maybe wasn't worthy, didn't belong, but earned his place there and felt really validated that he earned his place there. I definitely get that. I walk into these rooms and, you know, especially when I started in my career in sports, it was a long time ago. And there were not many females. There were not many females who were married, who had one kid, let alone two kids, who kept coming back to work for more. So I've definitely had that feeling of not necessarily believing you belong in the room and knowing that you needed to figure out what your purpose was in that room and find your voice in it.
You being a mom,
Mm-hmm.
you succeeding in this business, you and then going on to show others that you can make it happen, be a
Mm-hmm.
mom, be empowering, and do amazing things in sports media. If I were to talk to your kids now, I know they're all grown up, but and ask them, what was mom Aimee like during their formative years? Because as you've alluded to, you were at Olympics, you were
Mm-hmm.
traveling a lot, but they still had such an appreciation for you. How were you able to get to that level with them?
One of the things that was really important to me, and I've said this to other moms too, because it's a struggle. And again, I hate to keep aging myself, but back then it was, you know, it was not that common. Now, thankfully, you know, lots of moms work, dads stay home, dads work, it doesn't matter, it's all okay. Back then it was a little bit different. So I felt like it was a little bit more of an uphill battle on both sides of that equation, right? At work and in sports, and also at home in the suburbs with kids. But I never apologized for going to work or for doing what I did. I never apologized for going to the Olympics. And there were times that I got on flights knowing I wasn't going to see them for a couple of weeks. And I was excited for what I was doing. I realized they were following my lead. So they took my enthusiasm. And I felt if I left them with oh, I'm so sorry that I'm going, they would think it was a bad thing. And I didn't want them to feel that. I wasn't sorry. I was so excited. I knew I'd see them in a couple of weeks, and they got to go to a lot of Olympics. They had a lot of incredible experiences because of my career. And I knew they appreciated that.
Not only did they appreciate it, but they cheered you on. And you
Mm-hmm.
mentioned that at times they would come to events. So having them along with you, and here you are in this important position, and you've got your kids around, what sort of impact did you want to give off to them about what mom looked like being a mom, but also having work to do?
Yeah, it's funny because they would come into the office, so it humanized that whole work thing. You know, that work thing is so scary. Um, and you don't know what it looks like. It's just mom goes to work or dad goes to work, but they came there, they came to the Olympics, so they saw what I did. And I think because they felt a connection to it, it was easier, certainly for me. I, you know, don't know if it was easier for them. I should probably ask them at this point, but they loved seeing what I did. And they would make fun of the work version of mom. Like if I'd come home really stressed, they'd say, oh, there's the work version of mom, or oh, she thinks she's in the office. But they felt a connection to it, and they liked that. So it was fun. It was tough. I'm not gonna lie. I have an incredibly supportive husband who would bring them to the games. He had to take time off from his business, or we'd have a babysitter that would come too, and that's always weird. But it's, or at least it was then. But they were great with it, and it was fun integrating them. Again, it made life easier for me.
Aimee Leone is with me. I'm Bryan Fenley, national anchor, Fox Sports Radio, On to Something podcast. Of course, Aimee, Senior Vice President of Talent Relations for Fox Sports. When do you remember, Aimee, a time when your husband had that pick me up moment where you went to him and he sort of cheered you up, or him and his love and his praise to you and his support really helped you along the way?
Mhm. I think the Olympics were the biggest time because as much as I say would go, the kids would come out. Like when the kids came out, it was stressful because any of my off time was spent being mom and hanging with the kids and my husband, which was exactly what I wanted to do, but you didn't have that relaxation. And we were at the games back then. It was like for, I don't know, 5 weeks, 6 weeks between setup and going through it. And it was tough. And at some point you're running on fumes. So whether he was there or if I called him at home, I would definitely get from him and the kids those words of encouragement, or they were watching on television and they saw some moments that they knew that I was a part of. And that was really cool and definitely helped keep me going.
So many great qualities that you've shown. What do you think is the personality trait that you have that is the blueprints for why you've had so much success in this industry?
Oof, that's a tough one. The personality trait, stubbornness for sure. Definitely my Scorpio stubbornness kicks in because failure is just not an option. You have to figure stuff out. And working in sports and working in live television, you have to figure things out. And I love that challenge. Again, to taking on a dare, right? It's just something I've never been able to not do. Maybe live television is a bit of a dare because you just know things have to work out. And it's tough, but I learned at a very young age, from working with Dick Ebersol at NBC Sports, no was not an option. You had to figure out, we were always solution focused, and it was fun and it was challenging. And I think that stubbornness definitely helped play into that.
And how much you touched on this a little bit, but the fear of failure in driving you, what is it about failure that is something you never want to entertain, and where that came from?
I think it's less about failure for me than it is about letting people down. When you work in sports, as you know, it's a team.
Sure.
Your whole team is counting on you. And I remember one time during one of the Olympics, I went to the commissary and grabbed coffee from my boss and a couple of the other executives on the team. And somebody looked at me and they said, "You're getting coffee for them?" Like almost as if you're better than that. Like that's not what you got into this business to do. And I said, "No, but earlier this morning, he got coffee for me." Like that's what we do for each other. So I think the failure in something like that is less about a personal failure, but you never want to let your team down, ever.
Not only are you not letting your team down, but in boosting your team, how have you seen ways in which you have stood up for yourself the most, and how that's paid dividends for your team as a whole, for you career-wise, where you've been a staunch believer, an advocate for something, you stood up for yourself, and it ended up having a transformative effect?
That may require a little more thought here.
Well, that's the perfect time to sip some coffee and give yourself a little extra time to. That was a pretty deep question.
Was deep.
Yeah.
That was deep. All right, repeat that again.
So
I think I'm going somewhere.
Yeah. So as far as thinking of a time when, from a career life of yours, where you've had to stand up for yourself, for what you believe in, and it ended up having like a transformative effect, did great things for you, for your team, a moment where you took a stand and it ended up working well.
I would say it was the one that comes to mind first is actually before I even worked in sports. So it was very early in my career. I was in entertainment. And I remember there was a technical manager. I was a sort of like production manager. I think it was called something different at the time, but I was working for a show, and I was responsible for basically making sure that the shoots and the edit sessions all went okay. And I remember there was a technical manager there who flat out said, now bear in mind, this was a long time ago, but I was talking about a technical problem that we were having. And I was explaining it because I had gotten I didn't know it, I'm not technically trained, but I got the information from the tech crew in the shoot, and they knew that there was this potential problem that if it wasn't fixed now, it may cause larger problems down the road. So I talked to the technical manager and I relayed what I had heard. I had asked some questions, so I actually researched it and knew quite a bit about what I was speaking about. And he looked at me and he said, "Oh my gosh, that's so cute. That is so cute. Look at you talking technical."
Oh my gosh.
And I remember saying, wait a second, don't dismiss this, because if you dismiss me giving you this information, you are jeopardizing our shows.
Yeah.
So I'm bringing this to you because of your role on the show or with the network. So don't dismiss what I'm saying. And I think I called him out on it, and we later became really good friends, but I called him out on it in a way that wasn't too rude. I didn't say, honestly, you can imagine what might have been going on in my head. And there were a lot of words that I won't repeat here, and I didn't say then, but he ended up he didn't get it initially. And we actually did that next day. We did lose a couple of shows that we had shot. All the tapes were bad and they couldn't be edited. So we had to go back and shoot some again, but it proved the point.
Yeah.
My cute little point, right? About the cute point that I made when I was talking technical. But it definitely, my bosses were amazing and stood by me, and they elevated it. And the guy had to apologize and understand that that's not okay. And from that point on, both because I was right, because I felt I handled myself well, and I had the support of my bosses, it definitely empowered me and helped start the process of me finding my voice.
In you finding your voice and you having the support of your bosses,
Mm-hmm.
when they brought you on, Aimee, and this can go early on in your career, even today, what is it from a creativity standpoint that they gravitate most to with you, that they love most about you when it comes to your creativity and what you can bring to the table for a team?
I think in sports, it's probably less about creativity than it is about the fact that I'm not an X's and O's sports fan. I never have been. I'm very comfortable saying it. And that's sort of how I got into the talent space. I need talent to explain to me why a moment in sports is important. I don't know the history of the rivalries. I don't know what that play, the impact of that play. I don't know how that turned the storyline of a game, or that was similar to what happened 8 years ago. That's not my thing. So I need talent to explain that to me. So I never got lost in the X's and O's. And I think I almost presented a different perspective. I represented a little bit more of the viewer who might not be tuning in because they are really passionate about that matchup or a certain team, but I'm tuning in and I need a reason to keep watching. So I represented that audience that you wanted to bring to the television, or that you wanted to keep once they got there. And so it's a perspective that's had value over years.
You've also had a lot of value in helping others. You do a lot in that space, and uplifting others and building up others. What about that side of your life brings you the most joy?
Oh my gosh, it's so rewarding. I mean, seeing more and more women positioned for success in lots of industries, but in sports television specifically, seeing women go through different chapters of their lives, from, being a kid out of school to being in a relationship, married, children, whatever it might be, and seeing that they can still continue to work and have upward mobility. It wasn't a guarantee when I was in it. I remember back in the day, and again, I never took this as if it was something personal or degrading. I realized back in the day, as a woman, as a married woman, as a mom, in sports television at the time, people just weren't used to it. And I felt a responsibility to change the way they thought, not just of me, but other people who were like me. So I remember on Mondays, we would have production meetings. I worked for Dick Ebersol. People would have to come through me to go see him. And I remember some of the senior leaders would come in and say, hey, how was your weekend? Hey, how's your husband? How are the kids? And I realized they didn't talk to me about anything other than that.
Hmm.
And I get it. They were being nice. They really were. I didn't take it as they were being disrespectful. I felt that they were being nice, but I also felt I needed to add more depth to the conversation. So I tried to acknowledge what they said. Like, hey, my husband's great. Kids are great. Thanks. How about yours? How's your spouse? How's your kids? How's your weekend? And how about those ratings?
Yeah.
Or, did you see that game last night? But I would try to pivot it into something a little more substantive and professional, and take them asking me as just a kind gesture. They were engaging me in a nice conversation, but I wanted to pivot it to business too, so that they would know that I'm capable and I can talk to them about that stuff, and I'm a professional, not just a person they have to go through to see the boss.
In changing so many's mindsets, and as you said, it was from the past, it was just something that those were used to, and now
Yep.
you're sort of changing the way people think about women, and not just asking about their family. Sure, that's very important, but also asking about what they do in work. How much pressure, maybe that's not the right word, do you put on yourself to be that advocate, to continue to be out there on the front lines, Aimee, and to let people see more about what women can do from an all-encompassing standpoint?
I don't know that I feel the pressure of it. I actually really like it. And I've been amazed at how open and receptive people are to it.
Sure.
Even back then, I really didn't feel much resistance. It was almost like change management, right? The world was like this. They were used to that. It was moving this way. I felt this responsibility, not so much pressure, and I don't know where that came from, but this responsibility to kind of bring them into where we needed to go and get them kind of ready for it as it happened.
Where you've gone and what you've done, transformative, transcendent. And I am so grateful, Aimee, for a couple of minutes of your time and sharing your story here on the Onto Something podcast. I'm Bryan Fenley with Fox Sports Radio. Aimee, I appreciate your openness, your transparency, your storytelling, and so many people are going to be inspired by you. I don't even know that and I'm sure you do in a way, how many people are going to be taking your words and really be very appreciative of them, and you empowering others like you do in your everyday existence. Aimee, I'm Bryan Fenley.
Wait, that's pressure. That's more pressure.
So that's when I should have used it. But Aimee, this was such a fun conversation. Thank you so much for making the time.
My absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me. You are too kind and generous, and I appreciate you asking me to be on.